Lyra stood on the wooden platform, her small alien body trembling. The crowd around her was loud, rough, and cruel. They jeered and laughed, pointing at her tiny frame. Some held glowing devices that measured her worth in credits. Others shouted, insults calling her worthless. She clutched the small satchel she had brought. Inside were a few belongings and a piece of dried food she had saved for her child. Her greenish-blue skin was covered with scratches, her eyes filled with fear but also a desperate hope. She had no choice. She had sold herself to survive, to feed her starving child. The auctioneer, a tall, sharp-eyed alien with metallic teeth, slammed a hammer down and yelled, "Next!" Lyra's heart pounded, her breath quick. The platform felt high and exposed. She could see the faces in the crowd, some curious, some cruel, some greedy. All eyes were on her, waiting for someone to place a bid. Her mind raced, thinking about her child alone in a small room with barely enough food to survive. She swallowed hard, trying to hide her fear, but her small hands shook. The auctioneer's voice boomed again. Who will take her? Who will offer for survival? Or maybe for fun? The bidders stepped forward, one by one, their voices harsh. I'll take her for 5 credits, shouted a green-skinned alien with clawed hands. She is too small to be useful, added another, laughter following every word. Lyra wanted to cry, to scream, to run. But the platform was high and the guards were armed. She had no escape. The thought of her child's hungry eyes pushed her to stay strong. She could not falter now, not when the tiny hope she had left depended on her. Suddenly, a tall human stepped into the auction area. His uniform was simple but clean, unlike the ragged crowds around him. He walked with confidence, yet his eyes were calm. Observing the woman on the platform, he did not laugh, he did not shout, he did not treat her like an object. He simply stopped, hands at his sides, and looked at her with quiet attention. The room seemed to pause. The other bidders glanced at him, confused, some annoyed. Why is a human here? He does not belong. Lyra felt something strange stir in her chest. Could this stranger be different? Could someone see her as more than just an object, something to sell or discard? The auctioneer's sharp teeth glinted in the dim light as he noticed the human. Ah, a human wants her? He barked, excitement in his voice. Then place your bid, stranger. Show the crowd your intent. The human, Kale, stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. I will take her, he said, placing a bid higher than anyone else had dared. A hush fell over the room, the crowd murmuring in surprise. The other bidders looked at each other, unwilling to compete with the human. The auctioneer smirked, intrigued. Very well, she is yours, human, take her. Lyra's heart raced. She could not believe what had just happened. The nightmare of being sold, of being laughed at and humiliated was over. For now. The guards stepped forward, preparing to escort her, but Kale waved them off, motioning for her to come to him. His eyes met hers, calm, steady, showing no cruelty, only something that felt like care, something she had not felt in years. As she stepped down from the platform, Lyra's knees wobbled. The satchel in her hand felt heavier than before. Her chest ached with a mix of fear and hope. The crowd continued to murmur, some mocking, some curious. But she no longer listened. Kyle extended his hand and she took it cautiously, feeling warmth, trust, and safety. For the first time in a long while, they walked out of the auction hall, together, her small feet moving quickly on the dusty floor. She glanced back once, seeing the faces of those who had jeered at her, and she felt a quiet resolve. She would survive. She would protect her child, and maybe, just maybe, this human could help her see a future where fear did not rule her life. The doors of the hall closed behind them, shutting out the jeers and opening a path toward hope, toward life, and toward something she had almost forgotten existed. Kindness. The streets outside the auction hall were dark and narrow, littered with broken pieces of metal and debris. Lyra clutched her small satchel tightly, her heart still racing from the auction. The strange human beside her, Kyle, walked with calm steps, his eyes scanning the shadows, alert for danger. She had never seen a human move like this, like they belonged to both the light and the dark of the galaxy. Lyra tried to speak, but her voice caught in her throat, fear and relief tangled together. "Are you hurt?" Kale asked softly, glancing at her scratches and bruises. His tone was calm but filled with concern. Lyra shook her head, unable to find the words. Her throat felt tight, and tears threatened to spill. She had not been treated with kindness in years, and suddenly, here was a stranger offering care, not cruelty. Noticing her hesitation, Kyle gave a small, reassuring smile. "It's okay. You don't need to answer. Just keep moving." As they walked through the twisting alleys, Lyra's mind raced with questions. Who was this human? Why had he saved her when everyone else had laughed? What did he want from her? But with each step she noticed his careful movements, stepping over broken glass, avoiding puddles of waste, always keeping her safe. Lyra began to realize that maybe he expected nothing. Maybe he only wanted to protect. Suddenly, a shadow moved in the corner of the alley, quick and silent. Lyra froze, her heart thundering. Kale's hand shot out, grabbing her arm and pulling, her behind him. His other hand reached for a small device on his belt, a soft blue light glowing as he activated it. The shadow revealed itself as a scavenger, a small, wiry alien with sharp teeth. "Hands off!" Kyle shouted, and the alien recoiled, frightened. His voice carried authority that even Lyra did not fully understand. The scavenger disappeared into the darkness, and Kale exhaled slowly, turning to her. "See? Nothing will touch you while I am here." Lyra nodded, awe and fear mixing together. She had always thought the galaxy was cruel, that kindness was a lie. But here was proof, a human who risked trouble just to protect her. They continued walking, and eventually, the crowded, noisy streets gave way to quieter corridors. The air smelled less of smoke and garbage, and Lyra felt the weight of exhaustion pressing down on her. She had barely eaten, barely slept, barely survived. And now she was moving toward something unknown, yet strangely comforting. Finally, they reached Kale's ship, a modest but sturdy vessel, its metal gleaming faintly in the dim light of the distant city. Lyra's eyes widened. She had never been inside a human ship before. The floor was clean, the walls lined with strange machines and tools, a soft hum filling the air. Kyle opened a small compartment and gestured for her to place her satchel inside. "You can rest. Here your child will be fed," he said, motioning toward a small bundle he had prepared, wrapped in cloth and filled with warm rations. Lyra knelt and gently took her child in her arms, feeling the warmth and smell of safety. Her small heart felt hope stirring for the first time in years. She watched as Kale prepared a simple meal, heating food over a small panel, making sure it was ready for her child before even offering anything for himself. Lyra's eyes filled. With tears, she wanted to speak, to thank him, but words failed her. Instead, she simply watched, letting the warmth of the human's presence wash over her. Hours passed, and the small cabin of the ship became quiet, her child asleep. Lyra sitting, close to Kale, watching him as he worked, fixing small parts and checking devices. He moved with precision, focus, yet never ignoring her presence. Occasionally he would glance at her, his eyes calm and attentive. No questions, no judgments, just steady care. Lyra felt a fragile trust growing in her heart, the kind that had been impossible in the harsh world outside. Maybe, just maybe, she could survive this. And not only survive, but begin to live again. As the ship hummed softly, Lyra leaned back, closing her eyes for a brief moment, letting exhaustion take over. The world outside was dangerous, cruel and unpredictable, but inside this small vessel she felt something she had not felt in years: safety, warmth, and the first tiny spark of hope. The journey home was only beginning, but Lyra understood one thing clearly. With Kale by her side, maybe survival could become more than just life. Maybe it could become a chance at something greater. A chance at love, protection, and belonging. Days passed aboard Kale's ship, and Lyra began to notice small things that felt strange but comforting. The hum of the engines was steady, almost soothing, unlike the chaotic noise of the city she had fled. Her child slept peacefully in the small cabin, warm and fed, and for the first time in weeks, Lyra felt her body relax. Kyle moved through the ship with calm purpose, repairing machines, checking systems, and occasionally looking at her with quiet attention. His presence was strong but gentle, and Lyra could not help but feel safer than she had in years. She watched him cook one evening a simple meal for her child, boiling strange grains and warming small portions of preserved food. Kale did not rush, but his hands were precise, careful. Ensuring everything was perfect, Lyra's eyes followed him, wondering why a human would spend time caring for someone like her, someone so small, alone and insignificant in the eyes of the galaxy. Yet here he was, offering kindness without asking anything in return. The thought was dizzying, almost unbelievable. Her child stirred and Lyra hurried to pick them up, cradling the small, fragile body in her arms. "Eat," Kale said gently, handing her a small bowl. She took it cautiously, her hands shaking, and tasted the food. Warm, soft, nourishing. For the first time in days, she did not feel hungry for survival alone, but for comfort, for safety, and for a life that felt possible. Kyle watched silently, not forcing conversation, simply giving space, yet his eyes never left her. Full of quiet patience, Lyra wanted to speak, to ask questions, to understand why he cared, but words felt heavy and fragile. Instead, she watched him, noticing the way he adjusted the small straps on her child's sleeping area, making sure everything was secure, how he cleaned the small instruments used for repairs carefully and deliberately. It was a rhythm she had never known, and each gesture whispered something she had long forgotten, that someone could care without cruelty, that someone could see value in her life beyond survival. One night, the ship entered a quiet stretch of the galaxy, stars shining bright against the black. Lyra stepped out onto the small observation deck, holding her child close. The universe felt infinite yet strangely safe with Kale nearby. He came up beside her, silent at first, simply looking at the stars. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of metal and fuel, yet it was clean compared to the markets and alleys she had known. Lyra felt a small sense of awe, realizing the galaxy was larger than fear, larger than hunger, larger than cruelty. Kyle spoke softly. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" His voice was calm, yet filled with wonder. Lyra nodded, unsure why he had invited her to this moment. But she felt included, seen, and cared for, as if he had given her a place in a world that had never wanted her. Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them away, afraid to show weakness, and yet relief and gratitude welled inside her. She whispered to her child, "See, we are safe now." The small one stirred, smiling in sleep, and Lyra felt a warmth she had not known in years. Over the next days, Lyra began to talk more, slowly, cautiously, about her past, about the hunger, the fear, the cruelty she had faced. Kale listened without interrupting, nodding, offering small words of comfort. "You are not alone anymore," he said once, and Lyra realized those words carried weight she had never heard. They were not promises she had to earn, not orders she had to obey. They were simply truth, and it made her chest ache with a strange hope. She began to believe that maybe life could be more than survival. Maybe it could include trust, warmth, and even love. One evening, as Lyra watched her child play with small makeshift toys Kale had crafted, she felt the smallest spark of something dangerous and beautiful, a thought that scared her, yet filled her with a strange comfort. Maybe she could let someone in. Maybe she could hope. Maybe she could believe that a human could care for her beyond the price of survival. And in that moment, she realized the journey with Kale was more than escape. It was the beginning of something new, a glimpse of kindness she had never known, yet longed for. The ship drifted through the dark expanse of space, quiet except for the soft hum of its engines. Lyra sat near the small viewport, her eyes scanning the stars, but her mind was elsewhere, haunted by memories she had tried to bury. The faces of those who had laughed at her, The auctioneer's sharp teeth, the cruel bidders, all flashed in her mind like a shadow that refused to fade. Her small hands clenched her satchel, gripping the fabric as if it could protect her from the pain. Cale noticed her silence, his expression calm but attentive. "Do you want to talk about it?" he asked softly. The question was gentle, not demanding, but it made Lyra's chest tighten. She had spent years hiding her fear, her shame, her suffering, and now someone was asking openly, without judgment. She swallowed hard, words catching in her throat. I was sold once before," she whispered, barely audible. "I had no choice. I only wanted to feed my child." Cale nodded slowly, listening, his eyes never leaving hers. "You survived," he said simply, "and you are here now." Lyra wanted to believe him, but the shadows of her past were strong. The faces of those who had hurt her, the jeers, the cruel laughter, all seemed to surround her, closing in, even in the safety of the ship. She looked down at her child, sleeping peacefully, and felt a pang of fear. What if danger found them again? What if her past caught up to them? As if answering her unspoken fear, a sharp alarm sounded in the ship, red lights flashing across the walls. Cale sprang into action, moving quickly to the control panels. Lyra clutched her child, fear rising in her chest. "What is it?" she asked, her voice trembling. Cale's eyes scanned the monitors. "Pirates," he said, his voice calm but firm. "They've tracked us, probably looking for a quick profit." Lyra felt her stomach drop. The shadows of her past, no longer memories but a living threat, looming and immediate. The pirate's ship appeared on the monitor, sleek and black, fast-moving, weapons ready. Cale moved with precision, adjusting shields, preparing defenses. "Stay calm," he said, though his hands moved quickly. "We will get through this." Lyra nodded, trying to steady her breathing, her mind racing with possibilities. She had never been on a ship under attack, never faced danger like this, and the fear she had carried for years returned with full force. The pirate ship fired first, beams of energy striking the hull, the ship shuddering under the impact. Lyra hugged her child tightly, whispering words of comfort she barely believed herself. Cale returned fire, the controls glowing under his fingers, his focus absolute. The cabin shook, sparks flying from the panels, and Lyra realized that survival was no longer just about escaping the past. It was about facing the present, about courage and trust in ways she had never known through the chaos. Cale remained steady, guiding the ship, protecting them both. Lyra watched him, awe and fear mingling. The human who had saved her, who had shown her kindness, was now risking everything to keep them alive. She felt a small, fragile hope stirring in her chest that perhaps even in the shadows of the past, there was a way forward, a chance for safety and maybe even for life beyond fear. Finally, after tense moments that stretched like hours, Cale found a path through an asteroid field, shaking the pursuing pirates. Their ship battered but intact, he guided them into a quiet sector of space. Safe for now. Lyra exhaled, her knees weak, clutching her child tightly, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. We survived," she whispered, her voice trembling. Cale nodded, his hand brushing hers briefly, a gesture of reassurance. "Yes," he said softly, "and we will keep surviving. Together." As the stars shimmered around them, Lyra realized that the shadows of her past might always linger, but with Cale's steady presence she could face them, protect her child, and maybe even dream of a life where fear did not rule. The journey was far from over. Dangers still lurked. But for the first time in years, Lyra felt a glimmer of strength, courage, and trust. She would not run from her past. She would survive, and with Cale she might even begin to live. The stars stretched endlessly outside the ship's viewport, cold and distant, but inside the cabin was warm, lit by soft, steady lights. Lyra sat close to her child, brushing small strands of hair from their face. She could still feel the echo of the pirate attack, the way the ship had shuddered, the fear that had gripped her chest. Yet now, with Cale moving quietly around the cabin, preparing simple meals and checking equipment. There was a strange calm, a fragile peace that she had not felt in years. Kale turned to her, holding a small tray of food, his expression unreadable, yet gentle. "Eat," he said, placing it in front of her. Lyra looked at him, surprised. She had expected anger, distance, or demands, but here was care. Simple, steady, offered without condition. She nodded silently, taking the food, the warmth of it spreading through her tired body. Her child watched her, eyes wide, and Lyra realized that safety, even temporary, was a gift she had almost forgotten. As they ate, Lyra's mind wandered to the future, to the question she had not dared to ask. "Where will we go?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Kale paused, thinking carefully before answering. "There is a small settlement not far from here," he said. "Quiet, mostly humans and a few aliens who don't care about the past, only survival." Lyra's heart clenched at the thought. She had been sold, hunted, laughed at, and feared. But the idea of a place where she could rest, even for a short time, felt almost too much to believe. That night the ship glided silently, drifting away from danger. Lyra sat on a small bench, her child asleep in her lap, watching Kyle as he checked the navigation panels. He moved with careful precision. But there was something in the way he looked at her, a calm strength, a promise that he would protect even when the galaxy seemed determined to take everything away. Lyra felt the smallest spark of hope, fragile and trembling, but alive. Suddenly the ship's sensors beeped softly, a subtle warning. Kale's eyes narrowed, scanning the monitors. "Sensors are picking up something," he murmured. "Could be a stray patrol, or another bounty hunter." Lyra's pulse quickened, fear rising again. She hugged her child tightly, instinctively, seeking to shield them both. Kale's hand brushed hers, a small gesture but full of reassurance. "Stay calm," he said softly. "I will handle this." Minutes passed like hours as Kale maneuvered the ship through a dense asteroid field, using the rocks and debris as cover. Lyra watched, her heart pounding, yet strangely she felt safe. She realized that Kale's presence was more than protection. It was a shelter, a place where fear could be faced and yet not dominate. Even in danger there was care. Even in uncertainty, there was trust. When the threat finally passed, Kale guided the ship to a hidden space station, small and quiet, tucked into the shadow of a large asteroid. "This will be our shelter for you. Now," he said, docking the ship with precision. Lyra exhaled, relief flooding through her. The station was simple but safe. Warm lights and clean floors. A place where her child could run, sleep, and grow without fear. She felt a fragile gratitude, a trust that she had not known in years. As Kale helped her and her child inside, he said, "Rest here, eat, and regain your strength. We are safe for now." Lyra nodded, tears welling. In her eyes, she had never known safety without price, kindness without demand. Yet here it was, unexpected, offered freely by someone who had chosen her. Lyra hugged her child tightly, whispering, "We have shelter. We have a chance." The small one smiled, and Lyra felt warmth and hope rise in her chest. She looked at Kale, who watched them quietly, steady and strong, and realized that survival was no longer enough. Maybe, just maybe, this journey could become more than survival. Maybe it could become life, trust, and even something like family. The small space station was quiet, the hum of machinery and distant echoes of life a strange comfort to Lyra. She walked slowly down the narrow corridor, holding her child's hand, every step a reminder of how far they had come. Yet the fear lingered, shadows of the past clinging to her heart. What if this safety was only temporary? What if humans like Kale were rare exceptions and the galaxy returned to cruelty once more? Kale moved beside her, silent but watchful, his presence steadying. Lyra glanced at him, noticing the faint lines of fatigue on his face, and a strange thought touched her that he too carried burdens she could not see. Yet he had chosen to care, to protect, and that choice mattered more than the past, more than her doubts. "We are safe here," he said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "But you must trust yourself too, Lyra. Trust." The word was foreign, almost frightening. She had trusted once, and it had been betrayed, sold, stolen from her in the cruelest ways. How could she believe in someone again? How could she allow herself to hope? But Cale did not demand trust. He offered it gently, silently, waiting for her to take it. Step by step, she realized that trust was not just about believing in him. It was about believing in her own strength, her own ability to survive and protect her child. The small alien child skipped ahead, laughter soft and curious. Exploring the corners of the station, Lyra followed, smiling despite the fear still lingering in her chest. The station was safe, yes, but unknown, unfamiliar. And every new sight brought both wonder and hesitation. Cale's hand brushed hers. As they moved, a silent reassurance, small gestures that spoke louder than words. That evening, Cale showed Lyra the station's small garden, a strange patch of greenery under artificial lights, plants thriving in neat rows, an oasis in metal. In shadow, Lyra's child ran between the rows, touching leaves and smelling flowers. Curiosity shining in their eyes, Lyra watched, a strange warmth in her chest, that even in a galaxy full of pain, life could flourish, kindness could exist, and maybe hope could take root. Cale knelt beside her, pointing to a small sprout. "Even the smallest life can survive in harsh places," he said softly, "just like you and your child." Lyra's breath caught, the words simple, yet heavier than any promise she had heard before. She wanted to believe them, to let the fear slip away, but doubt was stubborn, creeping back, with every shadow, every unknown corner. That night, Lyra sat with her child, watching the soft glow of the station's lights. Every creak of machinery, every hum in the walls, reminded her of the fragility of life. And yet, for the first time in years, she felt a small spark of courage. The courage to hope, the courage to trust in this new world, to trust in Cale, and perhaps even in herself. She whispered to her child, "We are safe now. We can rest," and felt the small, steady heartbeat of hope in response. Cale worked quietly in the control room, monitoring the station, repairing small systems, keeping watch. The bond between them was quiet but strong, built in moments of danger, care, and silent understanding. Lyra realized that trust was not demanded. It was earned slowly in gestures, in protection, in choosing to stay even when danger came. And Cale had given her that gift without expectation. The galaxy was vast, full of unknown threats and hidden dangers, but within the walls of this small station, Lyra felt something she had not known for years, a fragile sense of belonging, a chance to breathe, to hope, to survive without fear controlling every step. She knew the future was uncertain, that challenges still awaited them, but for the first time she believed she could face them, not alone, not just surviving, but truly living. As the night deepened, Lyra held her child close. The soft lights, casting shadows on the walls, Cale's quiet presence near. She allowed herself to imagine a life beyond fear, a life where trust was not a weapon, but a shelter. And maybe, just maybe, love was not impossible, but waiting patiently in the unknown. The first rays of light filtered through the station's viewport, painting the metal walls with soft golden hues. Lyra stirred, her child still asleep beside her, breathing steady and calm. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to feel peace, a small warmth spreading through her chest. The galaxy outside was vast and unpredictable, but here, within these walls, she found a space to breathe, to hope, and to imagine a life beyond survival. Cale entered quietly, carrying a small basket of supplies, his eyes soft as he looked at them. "Morning," he said simply, placing the basket down. Lyra smiled faintly, nodding. There was no need for words. The quiet companionship they shared was stronger than anything spoken. It was built on trust, protection, and the small acts of care that had carried them through the darkness. After a simple breakfast, Kyle guided Lyra to the control room, showing her the charts of nearby systems, small settlements, and safe routes. "We have options now," he said, pointing to the holographic map. "We can settle somewhere quiet, start fresh, or keep moving if we must. The choice is yours." Lyra studied the map, her finger hovering over distant stars, her mind filled with possibilities. She realized that freedom was more than escaping danger. It was making choices, even small ones, for herself and her child. Hours passed in a quiet rhythm, the hum of the station a steady comfort. Lyra tended to the small garden, her child laughing as they helped. Kyle repaired minor systems, checking every corner with precision, yet not a single word of judgment passed between them. It was a life built in moments, simple and fragile, but theirs a stark contrast to the chaos and fear that had defined their past. Suddenly, a small alarm blinked, signaling a communication from outside the station. Kale activated the screen, and a friendly face appeared, a human from a nearby settlement smiling warmly. "We heard about your arrival," they said. "You're welcome here, safe and free. We have room for you, your child, and anyone you care for." Lyra's heart raced, disbelief mixing with hope. The galaxy could still hold kindness, she realized, even after all she had endured. Kale's hand brushed hers, a silent question and reassurance all at once. Lyra nodded, courage building in her chest. "We will go," she said softly, determination replacing fear. They packed their belongings carefully, Lyra watching her child laugh and skip ahead, free from fear. Kyle followed, steady and strong, leading them into the unknown with confidence. A path forward had been offered, and for the first time, Lyra believed in it. As the station faded behind them, stars rushing past the viewport, Lyra felt the weight of her past lighten. The auctions, the pain, the fear. They were shadows, yes, but no longer chains. She could face the galaxy with courage, with trust in Kale, and with hope for her child. The journey ahead was uncertain, but uncertainty no longer terrified her. It invited her to live, to build, to belong. When they finally landed at the quiet settlement, Lyra stepped onto solid ground, her child skipping ahead, eyes bright with curiosity and wonder. Kale followed, watching over them yet giving space for life to unfold naturally. The settlement was modest but welcoming, people offering smiles, simple gestures of kindness that felt miraculous to Lyra. She realized that safety, freedom, and love were not impossible. They had been waiting for her all along. That night, under the soft glow of lanterns, Lyra held her child close, Kale beside them, his presence steady, protective, and kind. She whispered quietly, "We have a new beginning," and felt it, fragile and strong. Hope was no longer a distant dream but a living reality, alive in laughter, care, and trust. The galaxy was vast, full of unknowns, but for Lyra and her child, the future was theirs to shape. And with Kale by their side, survival had transformed into life, and life into something beautiful. For the first time in years, Lyra smiled without fear, her child laughing in her arms, stars shining above, the promise of a new beginning stretching endlessly before them. They were no longer defined by the shadows of the past, but by the courage to trust, to hope, and to love. The human who had shown her that love could exist beyond price had given them more than protection. He had given them a chance at life, and they would embrace it fully together,